All right, kiddos. Today is multiplication properties, really similar to addition properties. There are some differences, and division rules, very similar to the idea that subtraction has rules, and so does division. Right? So division and subtraction are in a lot of ways related. They're taking big numbers, making smaller numbers, and they also have rules. Right? If you look back at your notes pages from, pretty early on, kiddos, we made a tool for addition properties and subtraction rules, right? And so here it's multiplication properties and division rules. So let's see, we got commutative property of multiplication, got the commutative property of addition, right? Order doesn't matter. Right? Looking at the pattern of those number sentences, 4 plus 1 equals 5, 1 plus 4 equals 5. In this case, 4 times 2 equals 8, and so does 2 times 4. Okay, we have the identity property of multiplication. We've got the identity property of addition. Okay, and we have the associative property or identity property of addition. Let me go back to that. 8 plus 0 equals 8. So the idea is maintain the identity of the number that you are adding to, okay, by adding 0. Keeps the 8 and 8. Here we have the identity property of multiplication, but instead of adding 0 to keep that 4 a 4 in multiplication, we've got to multiply it by 1 to keep it 4, right? Because if we had multiplied it by 0, our answer would not have been 4, it would have been 0. Okay, so there's your big difference with the identity property, right? You're starting with your number and you are going to do what to maintain it, right? What are you going to do to keep that 4 a 4? Multiply it by 1. In addition, you add 0 to that number. Okay, what you see here with addition and the associative property, okay, that classic property that just, it has parentheses, okay, that's when you know you're dealing with the associative property. Okay? In multiplication, you're not going to see that quite yet. Okay, so what you will see though is the 0 property of multiplication. What do you got to do to that number to make it a 0? And like I said up here when talking about identity, multiply it by 0 and you will turn your starting number into a 0. 3 times 0 is 0. Okay, so here's what I want you to think about. Did you make this page? We cut out the blue arrow from page 161. Okay, both of these materials here are from page 161. Okay, if you haven't done this yet, I want you to pause this video now, okay, and cut out the blue arrow, cut out the multiplication properties box. That's all you need from page 161. Pause the video, get them cut out, paste them into a piece of your notebook paper, and then press play. All right. So the next step in this is to make the division rules portion of this tool. So what are we going to do? You guys are going to come over to page 165, and what I want you to do is I want you to take 165 out, and I want you to cut out just the division rules. We've already got the properties up here, okay? Just cut out the division rules. So I will do that now. I want you to pause this video. I want you to do this now. Okay, Mr. Tillis should have done this earlier, but we'll do it now. Get it cut out. And then we have a tool to look at when we're looking at our practice problems. There's not a whole lot of math in this lesson. It's simply identifying what the property is, and then yes, you do need to solve the number sentences. Okay, but really we're identifying today. So you can cut that out, get rid of your scraps, and go ahead and put those division rules onto your note page. All right, so now you got this note page you can go back to, and you're going to put it into your math tools section of your binder. Okay, and and like a little bit of scrapbooking. So these two came from page 161. Okay, this right here came from page 165. Okay, all right. So let's proceed with this lesson. Let's take a look at some of the problems that we need to identify as either an example of division rules, right, or multiplication properties. So we are going to be turning to page 163. So we, children, I'm going to go ahead and circle all the problems that we're going to do, and we're going to do every single one of them. Okay? We are identifying the properties. Okay? And we're going to look for patterns. So, number one, okay, or 1 through 8, 3 through 8, we are identifying the property or rule shown by each equation. Okay? So we're just identifying it. They solved it for you. Okay? There's no unknowns. Simply going in and putting in the property. 6 divided by 1 equals 6. It's a division problem, kids. So identify the division symbol, and then come on down to division rules, right? What are we doing? Are we dealing with zeros in any of this, right? In this division problem, when you divide zero by any non-zero number, the quotient is 0, right? Or is it ones in division, right? When you divide any number by 1, the quotient is always the dividend. Quotient is always the bigger number. That's what the dividend is. Okay, the bigger number in the division problem. So I see the pattern as ones in division. 3, what's the property or rule? Ones in, I don't got enough room to write division there, so I'm going to use the second line they gave me. Okay, ones in division. Let's move over here to number 4. Okay, make sure you're pausing this tutorial. We've identified what problems that we're doing, and I want you to make sure that you're pausing the tutorial so that you can give it a shot. Okay, we are identifying multiplication properties and division rules. All right, 10 divided by 10 equals 1. Okay, so what are we working with here? Are we working with a division rule? Are we working with a multiplication property? Okay, we are working with a division rule, right? We are dividing a number by itself and it equals 1. Okay, so what can we do about that? Okay, looking at our information that we have on our notes page, okay, do we have a problem that looks like that, right? We don't. Okay, so let's identify the rule. Okay, 10 divided by 10 equals 1. When you divide a number by itself, right? When you divide 10 by itself, 10, the answer is 1. So that problem's asking you, what do you notice about that division problem? 10 divided by 10 equals 1. You notice that you have a dividend. Your divisor is the same as your dividend, and the quotient or answer is 1. Okay. Number 5, 8 times 0 equals 0. So now we're dealing with multiplication. Come up here to the multiplication properties section. Do you see a problem that looks similar to this? You have the 0 property of multiplication. 3 times 0 is 0. 8 times 0 is 0. The 0 property of multiplication. Okay. All right, moving on. 0 divided by 12 equals 0. Well, we are dividing, so come on over here to your division section of your tools. 0 divided by 9 equals 0. This problem here looks the most similar to what I'm doing here. So what do I see? I see that we're working with zeros in division. Zeros in division. Okay. 22 times 1, we're multiplying. What do we see? Ooh, something times 1, the identity property of multiplication. This language is not new to you. So getting comfortable with having your tool here, looking for a problem that is similar, coming over to your document, and finding the number sentence that looks most similar to the problem that you're working with. Right? Something times 1, something times 1, identity property of multiplication. Okay, and then you're going to start moving into this arena of, oh, I am starting to recognize these patterns without having to use my tool. Right? Let's see here. We've got 4 times 3 equals 3 times 4. Excuse me. Excuse me. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look for a problem that's similar, right? All I see is that I have 2 number sentences and the numbers are flipped. Immediately I see what I'm looking for. Okay, 4 times 2, numbers are flipped. 2 times 4, they both equal 8. Commutative property of multiplication. Commutative property, and that's fine. You can just put commutative property. All right, now we got to find the unknowns. Okay, so what we can do is use our properties to help us figure out what the unknown is. So what division rule says you start with a number, you divide it by some unknown. They got a gray box for you there, not a variable today. It's very nice of them, but it has to equal 1. So let's look at our division rules. All right. So going back to number 4, I'm sorry, take a deep breath, kids. Mr. Tillich does this pretty often. Going back to number 4, this property is still considered, or this rule is still considered that ones in division rule. Okay, why 10 divided by 10 is 1. Here, you divide a number by itself and it equals 1. That was the pattern. I didn't see that when I started working on number 4. So the rule is still the same. How do you make 1? What do you do with a 1? Okay. All right, so here, back to number 9. What is it that we have to divide 3 by to make 1? And I'm looking for a division problem. It's got to have a 1 as an answer. And again, that is my only example that I have of how to make a 1 when dividing. Divide it by itself. So I come up here to number 9. My missing number is 3, and we call that ones in division. All right, number 10. What do we got here, kiddos? Well, you got your tool. Okay. We've got a number sentence, and we got to find the missing number. Okay. So something times 8 is equal to 8 times 4. Right? So immediately I'm like, it's a multiplication sentence. Which property looks most like what I'm looking at here? Right? And so am I seeing something similar here? Multiply anything times 1? That's not what we're doing here. We're not multiplying anything times 0 here. So I come back to my commutative property and I can see that commutative property usually gives me two number sentences where the numbers are simply reversed, okay, not changing the answer. So to make sure that both sides of this equal sign are the same, that missing number must be the 4. Commutative property. Okay. Back to division. All right. So we're looking at division. We're looking at the rules. Okay. The division has rules. So something divided by 11 gives me 0. Okay. So I know I'm dealing with a 0. I know I'm dealing with division. So I'm going to come down to division rules and I'm going to try to find a 0. Boom, right there. There you go. 0 over here. 0. Dividing something by a number gives me 0. Dividing something by a number gives me 0. I know, based on my tool, the missing number is 0. In my rule, zeros in division. Okay. All right. Please remember to pause the video, give yourself a chance to do a little problem solving, and come to an answer before I give it to you. That's how these tutorials work. Looking at multiplication. Multiplying something by a 1, and it gives me an answer. So I'm going to multiplication. I'm looking for multiplication. Boom. I'm multiplying by a 1, and it gives me an answer. Multiplying some number by 1, identity property of multiplication. Any number multiplied by 1, the product is that number. Right? Whatever that number is it 4? Is it 15? The missing number is 15. And I am working with the identity property of multiplication. Multiplication. Heck of a word. All right, kiddos. Multiplication properties and division rules. Get your blue arrow. Get your multiplication properties from page 161. Get your division rules from page 165. Get them glued in. You got yourself an amazing tool to add to your math tools section of your binder. All right, kiddos.